Good morning. Today is August the 10th, and we are local today. The only real reason being that with Storm Debbie flying by and all the deadfall I encountered just getting here, I kind of figured Vermont might need a week to clean up if that is in fact the case up there. I could be wrong, but I just made the decision that I did in the early morning this morning, and we're in this area instead, so we'll see what we do in here. It's probably in the upper 70s right now, not crazy muggy. Surprising considering that we had a hurricane roll through. You'd think the barometrics would be a little bit crazy, but so far not so bad. And we're going to just make a sweep through here and do a rare late summer, early fall sweep through here, see what we find in the way of sign, and see what's on my mind along the way, and that's what we're going to do. So come on along and we'll see what we find. Thanks. All right, so we're back. This area is always interesting because of the seasonal changes it does, if nothing else. This kind of harkens back to my forestry class. I hadn't realized this time of year just how wet this place is. The whole ground, there's not really any dry ground I've encountered so far. And the ferns have taken over. That I've seen before, but the nature of the ground being so wet is morning dew, I guess. But those of you that have seen my winter videos are probably may recognize this area. But we're just kind of in here looking for sign, and again, the notion of Debbie going through yesterday was it was actually a couple of interesting days weather-wise, because it was like a prelude of a wet and rainy October for the last 2 to 3 days with Debbie coming up the coast. Probably right now wreaking havoc around Nova Scotia. Hopefully they're not getting battered too much. But yesterday night was rainy off and on, but like a drizzly rain, not really anything that gave me a free car wash or anything of any particular benefit. Muggy as muggy can fucking be, and not really that cool either. Just a weird mix of temperatures that you get in the middle of a post-hurricane related late summer nor'easter in New England. So now that we're done with the weather report, let's see. There is a thing coming up. I don't know why I'm giving them free press, but I don't really have an issue with the Vogel brothers. They have a thing they're doing at the Southwick, Massachusetts library. And I guess as an observation, some of the people that are affiliated with their greater Facebook group, the one that is run out of Massachusetts by name of Squatchachusetts, some of them seem to be branching out into squatching and quote-unquote sky watching, which would suggest they're like getting more into the UFO thing. And, you know, if that's your thing, I mean, I would probably go more in that direction than becoming like a ghost guy. That just isn't something I've ever really... There goes a duck. Anything I've really ever had great fast. I mean, it's interesting to a point, but for me, to get interested into like a haunting situation, potentially you kind of have to know the history of where you are. Just like, let's go look and scare ourselves with dust clouds or, you know, bugs flying up against the freaking camera and the weird lighting that they always did on ghost hunting shows. You can tell I'm a wee bit skeptical of their claims. Can we at least get some context of where you are when you're doing this? Because I'm going to cite another example. I may have done this in a previous video, but when was this? Probably like 2007, so a while back. I was in an area not far from Rutland, Vermont, where I was following up on a Bigfoot sighting report, and things kind of took a different turn because I took a side trail about a mile in from where my car was, and I happened upon this weird back. I had to do some emergency surgery on cameras because apparently the disc on the other one was full, so I switched it out with this one, and I have my intro over there. I'll have to retrieve that when I get home, but I started to switch over to the other camera, but it wasn't fully charged. This one is at least fully charged. And I haven't used the card on this one, so it made more sense to just switch out the cards and have the consistent fishbowl lens I'm using for whatever reason, and probably laziness. And the camera that I know at least has a full charge. I mean, if you're out of juice, you're out of juice. The other one, the disc is full. We can just switch them out and keep going, which is what I did. So I could actually probably pirate the one from my phone too, because that's a 256 gig one, so that one would, you're not going to fill that up on one video unless I'm out here for a good full day. But of course I had my police body cam, but that's back in the car, and I don't really feel like walking all the way back out to get that when I have multiple options here on my person already. So where I was when we left off with this little spider web here, we were talking about ghostly stuff briefly, and I was following up on a Vermont sighting report, rather detailed one too, and in the course of hiking the area, which is sizable, and at some point I should probably get back there for a follow-up, they have a side trail, and I went down that, and in the middle of nowhere, so think like in the middle of this, you come across a immaculate cemetery plot that's there for no rhyme or reason. When I say immaculate, I mean somebody clearly walks out there to maintain this and does a job where they probably deserve a raise if they're getting paid for that, because their labors are not unnoticed as far as I'm concerned. They actually, it was meticulous. It was interesting. But what I was going to say before regarding the family history of folks, if this was a haunted site, all these people seem to have passed in the same general period of 2 to 3 years at the turn of the century, like between 1903 and 1905 or 1907, that kind of time frame. And so you have the people, the names, the dates they were there. So if you were interested enough to do some digging in family records and learn about these people, you'd be able to do so, and then you have some context. Then if you had some kind of a ghostly thing going on, I'd be a lot more interested, because now you know who you're dealing with. Who are these people? What happened to them? Why did they all die around the same time? I'm trying to think if that was when the big turn of the century influenza breakout happened, and because a lot of people passed away during that time, sadly. I wonder if that was like the fate of this poor family. That would suck. But if it's any consolation to you folks, you had a darn fine plot. And people can remember you in style, because that was a very nice, well-maintained plot that you had. I was impressed. If I ever find it again and I find my way back through there, I will pay my respects again, since I did make your acquaintance once through the annals of time, sort of, kind of. But getting... What the hell is that? That's some weird-ass... whatever that is. Strange. Like I said, this area is always interesting. It's like almost like gelatinous chutney looking stuff. Anyway, we The odds of finding tracks in here, I mean, take a look at what you're looking at here. It's overgrown. The mosquitoes are finding me, though, despite bug spray. Respect the deep, please. Connecticut, we're not really in a valley, but thorn bushes. We're known for having thorn bushes. We do. So, there'd be a little bit of a kind of just bumbling through the woods looking for any kind of sign or any signs of anything. If nothing else, this is a good area to kind of like get some solitude with your thoughts. If you're a mushroom geek, you got a fair amount of those going on today that you could kind of classify your genuses and such. Unless you're more of a redneck and you prefer Ansitch. But anywho, they have the Squatchachusetts Vogel brother people have some deal going on with the Southwick Library. I think it's next week. I could be wrong, but could be worth checking out. I don't really do things like that just because I'd rather be out here doing this and looking for sign than talking about things, and I probably could have more of a public presence, but oh well. You can find me and follow along with the things I do on social media. That's good enough for me. It's a hobby for me. I'm not one of those who lives and dies by it. Anyway, interestingly enough, I saw a video on earlier part of the week, I want to say Tuesday, but it was going into the cryptids of New Hampshire, notably wood devils, which are a local form of pseudo Bigfoot, but they're allegedly a little thinner. They hide behind trees, and their name to fame is they will scream at you and scare the shit out of you and then run off. Whether they do that as a defensive thing or they're just assholes, you know. Because here's the thing, I've encountered one of these things in the greater Adirondack region, and yes, in the region where they're known to be, or at least thought to be, in the greater Whitehall area. And I know of 3 different stories where the one that's out there, and he's about 7 feet or so, he's a prankster. He likes to scare people, and he's done it to me. So that would have been 2007. Yeah, 2007. And there was one from the later 90s where I heard that he did it. And then, where is the other one? But basically, he'll make his deliberate appearance. And ironically, the one that the guy in the truck that literally admitted to pissing himself, I've slept in that exact spot, and it's kind of mentally interesting to be in that spot, knowing what happened there potentially. And again, it's interesting. I don't think people will routinely admit as a grown man that you pissed yourself, seeing something glaring literally in your truck window at you while you're sleeping. But not that the thing meant him any harm. Once he freaking got the reaction he wanted, he just kind of gave him the gotcha look and walked off, apparently, as the story goes. But that's Len's story, not mine. But with mine, it was kind of the same thing. He stepped out in the open and he got his reaction. And once he was all happy I was spooked and all that, or he had established his territory, he wandered off, leaving me with my thoughts. But the wood devils are like a little bit, they're not like these big 8-foot tall things you hear about on the West Coast. And the reason I say that is you look into trees like this. Basically, their name to fame is that they'll hide behind a tree and just blend in. And I actually have heard of a number of stories like this where they blend in, and when they hold still and you're out a distance of like the far end over there, it just looks like a stump because they just will let their hair fall over their eyes or whatever. And it's just a big black shape in the middle of other black shapes. And if you're not like acutely hunting or something where you're like out like I am right now doing pseudo forestry monitoring as well, then you're not going to have an eye for that. You're just going to kind of glance around and miss them. And the reputation they have is if you get too close, they give you the blood-curdling scream and run off, and you, if you don't drop dead of a cardiac arrest kind of moment, then you get to be alone with your thoughts and palpitations, and maybe you need to bring a portable defib and kind of self-defibrillate yourself, if that's a thing. And, you know, but again, the question there is if you believe in these things existing, and I have in Vermont encountered behavior in the ones I refer to as the family group that could be taken in this kind of light. So if you go by verbatim that you believe that I've run into these things, and I do have some theories of my own. One, I'm offering this as anecdotal evidence because, again, the being true to the critical thinking part of my psyche, this is something I perceptionally have encountered. So I have a story. I can't drag him out by the ear and say, yes, here he is. This is a bastard who freaking bluff charged me and scared the shit out of me that time, because that's not how that generally works. But I did encounter that kind of phenomenon to a point. They didn't scream as much as... I'm now a bit more open to infrasound, having experienced some weirdness that day and directly in proximity to actually seeing one jump up and run off. When people describe I'll call it the heebie-jeebie feeling, which I kind of come to think of, and this is again conjecture on my end, but kind of like infrasonic prickling, where they're kind of bumping it. My theory is that and this is more plausible than you realize when you think about this, bats are a land-based mammal. They use sound to hunt. They can see, they can hear, they can do everything normal, but they have this weird extra sonic ability as well. And resultingly, you have a precedent for mammals having some kind of abilities akin to what whales and dolphins do in the water. And what I encountered was probably something similar. So I got thinking let's give this a hypothetical and give it some credence for a minute. So you're out in the area like this, and they know you're coming. And given the fact there's no evidence for any of this anyway, you have the lazy woo-tards or woo-types that are basically like, they're psychic. Why can't they just have this sonic thing where they're doing what whales and dolphins or bats are doing, where they're bouncing sound waves out? Because most of your hikers walking through the woods that are talking and walking their dogs and yelling at their dogs and such, you can hear them coming a ways out. And I've encountered this myself. That I say from experience. And they often have what I call trail vision, which is they're looking dead ahead and they don't. Which is why wood devils, in the way they describe them, is not exactly such an implausible thing necessarily, because if you're walking out in the woods and you have this trail vision thing going on, you're not going to see them. You're not looking for them. You don't think to look for them, so they're not on your mind. Whereas they probably can see you, no problem at all. So the story that I'm telling here, so if you have something, you're not going to have huge You're not going to have huge range in here because the nature of the terrain is going to break up anything like that if you're talking like a general sonar wave kind of thing. But the spider webs. But you're gonna, if you get like a blip, you're gonna know something's there if you can do that. And that's still enough to have, if you have the presence of mind to be quiet, you know your neighborhood, and you know some blundering human and his dog are coming through, you have enough. I mentioned mushroom geeks. There's one for people to identify if they so choose. So that's one theory. And there was some other weirdness that day too that makes me think they are actually capable of using sound to, maybe not consciously by effort, but they can interfere with cameras, because I did see that happen too. I actually should have had video that day. And the cameras actually took damage. My iCam glasses never worked again after probably taking a hit from infrasound. And the GoPro survived, but the video card, the SD card did not. So, you know, it's a lot less clear how to get through here when you got all these goddamn ferns obscuring the ground. So, I just noticed that. So you got to be a little more careful. But what else is going on in the Bigfooting? It's always kind of weirdly slow sometimes. You go through these ruts where it's kind of slow and you don't really have a lot going on. And when I say a lot going on, you had a couple of things that come through that were interesting photos. The problem is you've gotten to a point where, hold on one sec. Back we had a equipment issue briefly. Basically the strapping on my backpack needed tweak. The bottom strap had come loose. So I may be wanting to switch out backpacks if that's going to continue. Every now and then that happens, and I do have to check the connections before I get into the woods, because I don't like doing it on the fly. Because if it's not reparable or you lose a piece or some stupid thing, ironically, this was a backpack I got as part of a first aid search and rescue kind of kit too. So if we're to fail you out here, like when you're looking for somebody who's missing, the equipment that came with it was phenomenal. The backpack was a secondary consideration in my opinion. It's a nice backpack. It carries the amount of stuff for a day trip when you're out here doing what I'm doing. But it's not like one of those backpacks I would haul out there if you're going to go and do a run through the White Mountains or hike the Long Trail or something where you're hauling all the stuff you're going to have with you. Like a thru hiker, that's a different kind of thing. And one day maybe I'll do that, but right now I've encountered thru hikers and they're kind of a different mindset in the woods. They have their own thing and they're just covering ground and getting to the next shelter. And I don't see the point if you're not taking in the time to take in the scenery, because I mean, the people I encountered the one time I did that were actually going through an area that had some awesome scenery if you stopped and looked at it, but they were just kind of banging through it. And that to me is kind of a waste. But trying to think, some of the people that are in the network have been busy of late, so it's kind of just been me for a few months. Because as the saying goes, life happens. Excuse me. And all too true. So we are sorry, itchy. We're just going to make our way through. I think I'm going to take a segment break, so I'm not just going to turn this into a woodland ramble, and that makes me tune into my surroundings a little bit more for any sense of evidence. And I'm kind of wondering if I'm bouncing around because I'm like batting at bugs a little bit too, as sweat becomes more of a factor and you start to undermine the bug spray. And there's got to be like a shift in your smell or something, because mosquitoes very quickly notice the difference, I find. Anyway, we'll be back in a bit, so stay tuned and we'll talk then.